students. This is Jonathan Lipson with The Real Deal on Contracts. Today we are going to talk about specific performance. If you're in my class, this is Unit 4. To this point, we've discussed remedies with a view towards trying to figure out the expectation measure of damages. Behind this is the intuition that money can solve the problem created by the breach of contract. But I think everybody understands that money does not solve all problems. And so, not surprisingly, courts over the years have developed an alternative path to achieving the expectation, which we can think of as the remedy known as specific performance. Specific performance is simply an order by a court to do a specific thing, an order to the breaching party. It differs from money damages because it's not the entry of an order or a judgment declaring that the breacher owes the non-breacher a particular dollar amount. Instead, it's an order by the court telling the breacher what to do. It's the purest form of the expectation interest because in a sense, it's giving the non-breacher exactly what they were promised, at least if the breacher follows the court order. Specific performance presents two basic types of issues. Number one, when is it available? Number two, how do courts actually get away with doing it, given the fact that they're not very strong institutions? When is what we'll spend most of our time on, and it really is most likely to be available when you have something in issue that is unique. The contract involves something that's unique. At common law, the classic example would have been real property. So we say that, if I, for example, promise to sell you my house and we have a binding contract for that sale, but then I turn around and sell it to someone else, if you sue me, you could ask for damages, but you would more likely ask me for specific performance, require me to sell the house to you, and a court would probably give you that relief. They would probably give you that remedy because courts have long viewed land and real property as being unique. I think consistent with the old adage that, real property, they're not making any more of it. So it's all unique. The same thing is true for unique goods. So for example, if I, instead of selling you my house, promise to sell you a unique Andrew Wyeth painting in a binding contract, and then I breached, you would also likely get a court to give you an award of specific performance, meaning I would be required by a court order to deliver the painting to you. The Uniform Commercial Code, as you might have already detected, liberalizes a variety of remedies and other features of contract law at the common law, or it liberalizes some elements of the common law. One way it does so is through its rule in 2716 on specific performance, because under 2716, a court may grant specific performance when goods are unique or in, quote, other proper circumstances, which then naturally raises the question, what are other proper circumstances? The comments to 2716 provide some guidance. Comment 2 says, among other things, that output and requirements contracts involving a particular or peculiarly available source or market present today the typical commercial specific performance situation. Now, the UCC doesn't tell you what an output or requirements contract is, so you might want to spend a minute kind of figuring that out. In addition, the comment says the inability to cover is strong evidence of other proper circumstances. We haven't really talked about the word cover in this context. When we get into the buyer's remedies for breach by a seller, you'll see that the classic way that we expect the non-breaching buyer to mitigate is, in a sense, analogous to what we expect of the seller when the buyer breaches, and that is to go into the market and find a substitute. Cover is just the fancy UCC word for going into the market and finding a substitute thing to purchase when the seller has breached. That's when. When is it available? When something is unique, real property or goods, or if you're dealing with the UCC in other proper circumstances. How do courts actually do this? This is a tricky question because if you think about it, in our system of government, courts are pretty weak. Legislatures are powerful because they have the ability to raise taxes and spend money. The executive branch is powerful because usually the executive has the power to commit violence, right, through the police or army or what have you, and to do so lawfully, obviously. Courts can't do any of that. They don't have money to spend, and they don't have, they don't have a standing military or army or whatever. So all they can really do is try to persuade people to follow the law. That's one of the reasons that opinions are so important. Judicial opinions are so important because they're trying to persuade people what the law is and should be followed. It is true that if a court enters an order requiring a defendant in a contract action to specifically perform his or her obligations under the contract, and that person fails to do so, the court can hold that person in what's called contempt, which, in theory can produce fines or in some cases even jail time, but that's pretty rare. And it's not, I don't want to say it's a weak sanction. It's probably the most powerful sanction a court has, but it's not super strong. So one of the underlying difficulties of specific performance, I think, is that courts have a limited capacity to grant specific performance, and that in turn might tell us something about the circumstances in which it's willing to provide such an order, when it's willing to grant an order for specific performance instead of damages. Final point, specific performance is, I think, quite common in cases involving real estate and maybe unique goods, but by and large, it's the exception. I think mostly plaintiffs ask for, and mostly courts grant, money damages as the presumptive form of remedy for breach of contract. In theory, you could get both. You can't get more than expectation, of course, but typically they are seen as alternative paths to the same end, and that is to say expectation. We'll discuss this more in class, and I look forward to seeing you then.